the issues we want to talk about as far as like Michael Flynn and Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and some of these issues of radicalization, post Biden radicalization. I know we were talking about it a little bit leading into the show, but I don't know. Did you want to start off? I know you had some stuff to say about Michael Flynn, unless you want to wrap up anything about the last thing we were talking about.
I do. Let me. I'm just trying to grab. I'm trying to grab my laptop's been acting up, so I've been having to do everything on my tablet, and I'm trying to find my tablet right now. That's all. Give me a second.
Oh yeah, no problem. But yeah, while Lawrence does that, I actually want to do like a brief aside as we are about to dive into these issues, really exposing like some very gnarly and alarming rhetoric coming from, one of America's two capitalist parties. It's worth reminding, like, I have seen a lot of people trying to kind of downplay fascism online. And I'm talking about like people who consider themselves leftists or progressives. So I've seen some folks recently really trying to downplay like January 6th. Whataboutism. It's like, why are white liberals getting their panties in a bunch about some hooligans at the Capitol when imperialism is still a thing? Or, trying to dismiss it as a very minor compared to, historical racist and white terrorism. Especially we just had the anniversary of Tulsa. It's worth mentioning, especially, as we're going to fill in the context with some of the stuff we're going to talk about. Like, you're absolutely right. In context of American imperialism and stuff that we do everywhere else in the world, and the stuff that the American government does to its own population, in that, if you are just from that perspective, like the assault on the Capitol was a fairly minor event. But you're also not looking at the way that this works in terms of kind of propaganda and the way that this manufactures consent for some very kind of like scary normalization. We recently had the Republicans block the January 6th investigation. You might say like, oh, those conservatives are going to be conservatives, or, fake shock from a lot of like the news outlets. But the effect that has is trying to normalize that kind of behavior, to basically say we have the back of the people that stormed the Capitol, with the ostensible purpose of, and let's not forget, because a lot of people are trying to like, rewrite history and say that it was a much milder event than it was. You had people there who were there to like, hang and citizens arrest various members of Congress, including the vice president.
They literally erected gallows. They placed bombs at the RNC and DNC. And the reason why we are bringing that up, because we want to make sure that we give you that context for why Michael Flynn, who was in the Trump administration, who is still helping to craft policy, was at a QAnon event. Why is he at a QAnon event? I do not know. I do not care, but it is relevant.
You'd think there after none of their predictions came through that movement might like try to collapse a little bit, but I guess like that's the staying power of conspiracy theories in 2021. But go ahead, Lawrence.
It's the same reason why people think UFOs exist, and we have the greatest information system. We have the NSA, FBI, CIA all constantly spying on us, and you don't think one of our satellites would have saw a plane or something? But anyway,
actually, Lawrence, I do have to correct you there. The Pentagon and the U.S. government did recently disclose that UFOs are a thing, and there's so much other stuff going on, nobody cared. Like that's a
I have my own. I'm skeptical about it. I have my own skepticism about that, but that's a totally different conversation.
I saw just real quick. I saw this political comic related to that. It's like a spaceship landing out, and an alien pops out, and it's like just some guy on his phone, and the alien's like, "Aren't you surprised? Aren't you shocked?" And the guy's like, it's like I don't know, man. I got like 50 other things going on. high. But
Like, dog, there's a lot of this. That's actually a conversation that we can have for the bonus episode, and I can tell you why I'm skeptical about it, and why my brain is like, nah, that's some BS. And I'm sorry for cussing earlier because I cussed earlier, and we're not.
Let's not get too far off the path. Let's
anyway,
get back to stuff.
Michael Flynn. There's a man that's in the crowd at this QAnon event, and the QAnon dude's like, "Ayo, why can't we have a military coup like the one that happened in Myanmar?" You would think that this former general, right, that this person that's a high-ranking official in the Trump administration would say, "That's crazy. That's not how America works. That's not how we deal with things. You know what I mean? We care about democracy. We give democracy to other countries. That's how much we care about it." And he said, nah, it should happen in America. You know what I mean? There's no reason why we can't have that happen in America. I just want to remind everybody what happened in Myanmar. So this is coming from, so I have a couple sources. This is coming from the BBC. First is an excerpt from the BBC. What happened in Myanmar? The military is now in charge and has declared a year-long state of emergency. It seized control February 1st, following the general election of I'm going to butcher this lady's name, of the person who won the election in a landslide, Misuki. I don't know how to say her name. I am horrible. I'm sorry about that. Her party won by a landslide. The army, the army of that country, force had backed the opposition. The armed forces backed the opposition, and where they demand a rerun of the votes, claiming widespread voter fraud. The election commission said there's no evidence to support said claims. The coup took place as new session of parliament were set to open. Miss Su, I cannot say her name. Jesus Christ. But that lady she won her election, but she was being held in an undisclosed location since the military coup. She's been facing various charges, including violation of the country's Office Secrets Act, possessing illegal walkie-talkies, pushing information that may cause fear and alarm. Like, they used voter fraud as the framework to do a coup on the elected leader of the country. And I also want to remind everybody that there was pushback. There were protesters. Over 600 people died. Thousands of people were injured as the military decided to crack down on civil disobedience in the general strikes that were taking place. The law enforcement, the military, the armed forces were shooting and killing the protesters, and shot several people, you know what I'm saying, execution styles, and shot them in the head. This is the thing that General Flynn just said, yeah, we should have that in America. I want you to keep that in mind, because remember, 2 police officers died at the Capitol. 5 people, I think 5 people died at the Capitol riots. A bunch of people got injured. And remember, Mitt Romney and others were minutes away from the rioters seeing them. That was the precursor to what they want to do, which is this. Now, the reason why I'm saying they want to do, there was a study that came out that 40% of Republicans believe that uh, it was like it was that I think it was like 40% of Republicans believe that it is time. Well, not it was like 20. It was like 15% to it was 40% of Republicans believe that Trump is the actual president, and that it was around 15% that believe that we need to do violence. We need to commit violence to bring our country back. I need y'all to also understand, and this is the reason why I'm glad that you brought up the Tulsa. You brought up Tulsa and other things that happened during Reconstruction. It wasn't the majority of the country that was doing violence during that time. It was a minority number of the country, but a large minority of that country were open and active KKK members at that time. They were open and actively antagonistic, and being violent. It was a minority group of people that were that did the violence. But the majority of the country, the one majority of the white Americans, they went along with it. They were okay with it. It wasn't being condemned. There wasn't a pushback from it because it did not affect their financial interests. And they did not see Black people or in other minorities as equal. So if we are going to be in a country moving forward where the thought process of one of the major parties is that we need to commit violence because they can no longer work in our representative democracy, and they think that violence is the answer. And you saw how quickly Republicans went from, yes, we condemn Donald Trump for from egging on this violent mob, to, you know what, it's not that big of a deal. Why are we still talking about this? They went from this is a horrible thing because they attacked us, to it's not that big of a deal. So imagine if somebody would have been shot, if Romney would have got shot, if they really did hang Mike Pence, how quickly would they have been to be like, you know what, this is normal. It's not that big of a deal. It was actually Antifa, remember? Because that's what they're saying now.
And they probably would have like a lot of just RIP to Mitt Romney on Twitter, and then probably lead a lot heavily.
Dog,
plain Antifa thing, but
it's not hyperbole. Remember, Herman Cain went to one of Donald Trump's rallies when they said coronavirus was still a hoax, and then he died from coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a joke. They don't care. These people are tripping.
Yeah, and I'd like kind of just jump off of that too, and really point out that, like, just to kind of summarize some of what you just said, like, especially back in November when we did like our presentation on, like, what to expect when you're expecting fascism. I think it's important to bring up the American context when we're talking about like fascism in America. It isn't really necessarily even something new. And we even talked about in terms, it's like, white supremacist violence. This is kind of a push. It's not to like bring about something unprecedented. It's kind of like trying to push a return to the bad old days where this white supremacist violence could run unchecked, and the federal government really wouldn't do anything about it, or state governments, etc. It basically, some of those that support clown coups are the same who would like to see things like Tulsa happen again. And I'm not joking about that. A lot of those people in the Capitol with their Confederate flags and Nazi flags and all that, that's exactly what they would like to see happen. I wanted to read really briefly from this excerpt. This is from a Truth Out article. They're interviewing Shane Burley, who's an author who's done a lot of work around like kind of anti-fascist theory, from Movement Memos podcast. But I wanted to read a little bit of what they said because I thought it was just completely on point here. So he talked a little bit about like kind of summarizing what's been going on the last few months. The alt-right, they've kind of hit this period of retreat where a certain desperation sets in. They've been pumped full of this kind of eschatology of the end of the world, a sense of white genocide and other things. It's basically desperate need to act, and then their actions are invalidated, and so they don't have anywhere to put it. And this creates kind of a flux on the fringes of their already fringe movement, where people start to take these kinds of seemingly spontaneous actions. And it refers to a lot of the mass shootings that have been going on recently. But then he goes on to say, we have a real extreme situation with that right now, because what happened over 2020 was what I call a mass radicalization event, where basically the level of radicalization that you normally assume only happens on the far right fringe happened in a really huge swath of Republicans. I mean, we're talking about massive percentages think that the election was stolen or fraudulent, which therefore implies a revolutionary politic. If the government is illegitimate by their standards, then revolutionary action, violent action, is likely legitimate, and at least extra legal action and extra judicial action is legitimate. And then just finish this out. And I think now that point of retreat, that narrative about captured governments, QAnon, and that kind of shadowy cabals that is creating that sense of eschatology inside a much larger swath of people. And we're talking about a very heavily armed populace, one that's radicalizing itself, that's sort of self-traumatizing through its own mythology. I think that creates a really dangerous situation. And he also points out how a lot of these anti-protest bills about running folks over, and we brought this up on the show before, like whether they pass or not, it goes into that normalization. It sends a signal to some of these really extreme fringe people that like it's open season on leftists and protesters, etc.
I mean, we talk about QAnon, who say they care about that the Democratic Party believe that the Democratic Party is a cabal of child sex of pedophiles, child sex ring pedophiles, while Matt Gaetz literally paid underage women to have sex with him. Like Jim Jordan literally covered up for the wrestling coach that was sexually assaulting his players. Not to mention everything with Donald Trump. If I have to talk about how Donald Trump told was okay with Zolina Maxwell and was wishing Jeffrey Epstein's accomplished that wishing her well after partying and being with them. Like it makes no sense on how, when you have literal evidence of everything that they say they care about or are fighting for, and the people that represent them are doing that. Like it bothers me. It just bothers me, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I'm just gonna cap this off by saying, like, while I'd say like the core of this, we're talking about like these far right militias and neo-Nazis and stuff. The core of that is very much a kind of petite bourgeois middle class constituency. Like, like I said about the coup, most working class people can't like take off, a week and stay at a nice hotel to go, commit an insurrection. But there are also a lot of working people with legitimate grievances in rural areas who are tuned into like the Fox News ecosystem, and a lot of them can get swayed one way or the other based on what's presented to them. And one of the best stopgaps to fascism is to make sure that people's basic needs are met. Like it really, like the past several decades of like neoliberal deconstruction just really kind of set the stage for these types of like overt fascist politics to occur. And we're really in kind of a race against time now, like between will enough be done to protect voting rights, to improve the social safety nets, to head off something really awful happening like in 2022 or 2024, And if I like, I'm reading the tea leaves now, I would say no. And it's really sad. People like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, stop keeping the filibuster for like these nascent reasons, while literally, if you don't pass the For the People Act, and it's got its problems, don't get me wrong, um, you know whatever like fig leaf of democracy that we do have that's kind of stopping this overt white terrorism is just going to completely fall apart. And I thought back to like, so sometimes network, like when I go to work at night, the channel 3 is on, and Stephen Colbert had Bernie Sanders on, and it's kind of in the background. And Stephen Colbert asked him a very interesting question. It's like, why do you think Joe Biden is being a little bit more progressive than we all originally thought? And Bernie had this very interesting answer. And basically, to sum it up, he was like, I think he's, like after what happened on the 6th and what's happened the last 4 years, I think, people like Joe Biden are starting to understand that if we don't address people's material needs, then American democracy, or whatever you want to, for whatever it is not going to be around much longer. And I think that was a really prescient point to make. And wherever it is going to happen in the next few years, again, we always put our chips into people's movements and organizing at the grassroots level. But how these things are going to play at the national level is going to have pretty profound effects for how we're going to be dealing with this violence and these problems in the years to come.
Yeah, man. Like I feel like, one part of it, like, I agree with a large portion of that. And just to add to it, like, you have to fix people's material well-being. Also, it goes to, we have to fix the material well-being of people. But at the same time, a lot of the programming of why we are here, or the situation of why we are here. It's contrary in American society to explain to somebody that the problem that you're having is not strictly your fault. It's contrarian to say that, because we, in the rugged individualism, that if you succeed or fail, it's on you. There are systems that are put in place to make sure that you stay where you are. And then you are told that, and you are told that by people who say they have your best interest at heart, um, the reasons why we are here, the reason why you are here. And Matt Gaetz, Flynn, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, others, they make profits. They make profit off of lying to the people, so that we do not actually put in place policies to fix those issues. And you have other people on the other side, like Joe Manchin and Biden and other neoliberals and corporatists, that make profit off of the system that we have. So it is a larger issue that we have to be able to come together to fight on.
I want to just jump off of that. I know we're kind of going over where we usually break, but I think this is a really important discussion. So that reminds me of talking about how they're very much kind of programmed for this bootstraps, individualist thinking. There's a writer, Umair Haque, and he's written a lot, pretty extensively, about kind of the rise of American fascism. He's somebody who grew up in a state that also suffered kind of like an authoritarian coup. And something that he mentioned is he described this in a very very fluid way that I think really applies to what we're talking about here, which is kind of this idea that when we think of like neoliberalism and kind of Reaganomics and all of these kind of policies and really like kind of and then almost more importantly, like kind of cultural ideas of individualism. It's kind of similar to how, like, you compare it to, like, so, Soviet Union was like a social experiment in collectivization and, workers' democracies and stuff. And, you can talk about its successes or failures however you want, but the people who lived in that country understood that they were parts of this kind of like Soviet experiment. Whereas in the United States, our population was also put under an experiment to see if like mass privatization and individualism could be a working economic model. Well, the results are in, and it's a total and abject failure. But here's the thing: the American population, most of the American population, has never been clued in that we've been part of an experiment. So even though that system has objectively and unequivocally failed, you have a mass of the population that is still clinging on to those social values that has really been taught from the cradle to completely forget the like earlier paradigms of like workers' struggles and trying to create like a social safety net and stuff. So it really leaves us in a dangerous situation where, I do have a lot of hope, especially in younger folks who, mass majority of like, Gen Z, millennials in this country have come to start questioning all of these things and realize, that's neoliberalism. That's the big lie. Privatization, that's the big lie. But, especially a lot of older folks and, folks that are kind of in these right-wing social media bubbles, they get very combative when you try to question these cultural values that, again, are kind of imposed on them by, the Reagans and the Thatchers and all the Republican
And the Clintons.
of the day.
And the Clintons, man. Like, I don't know if you saw Thomas Frank. I don't know if you saw Thomas Frank on Bill Maher, which is another story that I wanted to break down. And just it was a small clip, small little quick hit, because I know we have a bunch of other bigger stories that we have to get to. Thomas Frank, who wrote the book Listen Liberal, What's the Matter with Kansas, and other fantastic books. He's a fantastic author and someone who I like reading and link to his philosophies. He went on Bill Maher and he was basically breaking that down. He was like, yeah, people talk about how they pine for the Clinton administration when Clinton as a president basically said, hey workers, you're screwed and we're gonna retrain you, but we're not. And then deregulated Wall Street, took away Glass-Steagall, destroyed the telecommunications infrastructure that we have in this country. So that only 6 media companies control everything that you read, see, and hear on most platforms. This is also the reason why those same legacy media companies want to destroy YouTube and independent and like in other independent other places where you can find independent media that's not beholden to the to what they call the standard. And yeah, it was that type of triangulation that led to Bush second, that led to a lot of the things that we are seeing now. It's not that, and again, this isn't just that Democrats suck thing, because Democrats, the corporate Democrats do suck, but it also goes back to the Republican ideology, moving more to the right. When you move more to the right and you care more about the profits of corporations over the proletariat, over the people, you see what we get into. It's going to actually tie into another story that we're going to talk about when it comes to the housing market and how the Coke industry and BlackRock is now buying up houses, and we're going back to that 2007, 2008 housing bubble that's starting to happen again. But that's another story. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think like this is a really important discussion to have. I'm glad y'all stuck around for some of the extra bits. I think at this point we're going to take a little break and transition into some other material. But I guess like just a couple recommendations if you want to dive deeper on any of these topics. If you want to find out more about how Democrats have been kind of complicit in this neoliberal project, Listen Liberal by Thomas Frank. It's a great book. Shane Burley, he's the anti-fascist writer I mentioned earlier. Why We Fight just dropped, which is really good modern analysis. And then also Fascism Today, really great read, trying to parse out fascism in the last couple of years.
If we're talking about media, and you want to understand media's how our media is basically worse in some ways are worse than state-run media. Look at make sure you read Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent. Like that should be standard reading for a majority of Americans, but most people don't. It's not something that most people read. Democracy Matters by Dr. Cornel West, another great book. We're gonna start putting a book club together. we gotta start putting a book club together. Oh snap!
All right, everybody, we're gonna go to a.
That's cute.
All right.
No, go ahead. We're gonna take a break. So
yep. All right, we're gonna take.
So I do want to tease this next story because I think this story is funny and we need to talk about it. Right. We have a story of instant karma coming up.
Okay, yeah, this is good. I think it's a good lead into the interview we're about to have too. So, all right, okay, y'all are listening to the Hood Rat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find our full-length episodes on our Facebook page. We usually stream them Thursdays around 6 o'clock. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We break down our stories into shorter, more digestible clips. And please share those out. That way you get the community listening and engaged. Y'all listening to the Hood Rat Strategist radio program, your only source for political revolution.